It's an emergency version of the Fenway Rundown podcast, Thursday, December 12th. I'm Chris Cotillo, Sean McAdam alongside. I'm still in Dallas. Sean, you were back home in Massachusetts, which explains in large part. We've had a couple people ask why we didn't do an emergency pod right after the Garrett Crochet trade broke. You got in an Uber to the airport. Your time in Dallas for the winter meetings was over. That's when the Red Sox decided to pull the trigger. It was a fire drill, of course, and now we are able to coordinate, coordinating around two 4.5 hour flights. Really a treat. But we're here. We're here now. Of course, everybody has been updated thoroughly on the Fenway Rundown Insider Text program.
Which you can join by texting the word join to 617-751-6257. Get breaking news, ask questions. You know the drill. Click on the link to subscribe. Free 14 days on us as our holiday present to you. After that, we're not in a giving mood, and we're going to charge you $4.99 a month.
Everybody at this point knows what happened. About 20 hours ago now, the Red Sox get their ace, Garrett Crochet, somebody we've talked about on this pod repeatedly. As of earlier in the week, I reported that they were not really all in on those talks, and that was the truth of it. As they got to the winter meetings, they were not one of the aggressors there. The Yankees, the Mets, the Reds, some other teams were involved. We had heard Milwaukee a little bit, just a few different teams. The Red Sox were not one of them. Juan Soto goes off the board, Max Fried goes off the board, and it seems like Tuesday into Wednesday, the Red Sox became a real aggressor when it came to Garrett Crochet. In those talks, as we know, all it takes is a certain offer or a certain name to be included, and from all accounts, pretty quickly to come together. Kyle Teel is the headliner, Braden Montgomery, Wickelman Gonzalez, and Chase Mydroth, the four-player package. A lot to get to here, but just, when you were in your Uber yesterday, what were your first reactions?
No, not in my Uber, in the security line at DFW.
Okay, yeah. Well, what was your first reaction when you saw it?
Yeah, that it was a steep asking price. Obviously, when you're giving up two of your top five prospects in what is now a very good farm system, that is the Red Sox farm system, that's a lot to give up. But you're talking about a 25-year-old guy with 2 years of control who has an enormous ceiling. And what I like best about this trade, as I wrote yesterday, Chris, you pay one way or the other to get premium pitching. Either you pay better than $200 million, as the Yankees did to get Max Fried and outbid the Red Sox, or you give up prospects to get one who still has some control remaining. In this case, the Red Sox are going to have to do a little bit of both, but that's part of it. What I like best is that they are getting the prime of Garrett Crochet's career. This is not a 31-year-old as Fried is. This is not a 30-year-old as Burns is. This is a guy who's 25. You control him for 2 more seasons. Presumably, there will be an extension coming that will get them at least another 5 years. And now you're talking about a guy from 25 to 33 or so, right in the sweet spot of his career. Now, this is a guy who's already had Tommy John, and we know that you can't guarantee the health of pitchers, but you are getting the prime of his career, which I think is the headliner here. Yeah, it costs something. Yep, they had to give up 2 really good prospects. And while I don't love the Chris Sale comparisons, everyone's saying, oh, it's Chris Sale all over again, because Chris Sale was far, far more established than Garrett Crochet was. If we're looking at the timelines, it is a matter of getting a frontline starter and running the risk that a couple of those guys, namely Teel and Montgomery, are going to turn into really good players. And if that's true, that's okay, because you identified a guy who can head up your rotation. It was your number one need, and you filled that with, I think, a pretty good gamble of a trade.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at, and we've talked about this a little bit in the past, but Sale, at the time the Red Sox traded for him, he had been an all-star 5 years in a row. He had put together seasons of 226, 208, 214, 192, and 174 innings. He was a Cy Young finalist 5 times in the top 6, got MVP votes, and he had 1,100 innings under his belt. So that's an established, guy at age 27. Garrett Crochet has, as we know, just 219 innings at the major league level. You wrote about and talked about projection versus certainty, whether you go for a Crochet versus a Fried, who, the floor is higher. But with Crochet, the upside is around the same. And that's, I think, the big takeaway here. I tweeted right in the aftermath of this trade, that's a massive price to pay. People looked at it and said, and I got a lot of criticism for that. And I think it might have been a snap overreaction that, I saw the two first rounders. Now that, you think about it a little bit more, they didn't trade Abreu or Casas Duran. They did not trade from Anthony Meyer, Campbell. So, the fact they were able to keep all those guys and still get this done is something. I mean, saying it's a massive price to pay is not a criticism, and it also doesn't mean that it's a bad trade. They gave up
Right.
a lot. They were uncomfortable doing what they did. And I think that's the big takeaway here is that the Red Sox have not done anything uncomfortable for years. They've said they've wanted to. Uh, you know, like Trevor Story's deal is 140 million. That's a ton of money to a regular person on a regular basis. For a baseball team, that deal is not going to kill you. Some of these mega deals are very uncomfortable. We saw what Soto landed at. We saw what Fried landed at, what Burns will probably land at in the next couple of days. Um, but this was, I'm sure, uncomfortable for Craig Breslow. It's the type of deal we never saw Heim Bloom make. They were in a different place organizationally. And it's a type of trade we have not seen the Red Sox make, really dating back to the Dombrowski days where they were going after guys like Sale, going after guys like Kimbrel. And, I think the industry consensus from people I've talked to is that it's fair. Um, if the Red Sox, the Red Sox went into it knowing that there's a chance two of these guys, could turn into all stars for Chicago, and they
Right.
went to it
And there's
understanding
also
that there's the chance that all four of them contribute at the big league level, and you're also as everybody knows, giving up your last two first round picks, which is no small thing.
right. I mean, there's risk involved, but why wouldn't there be risk to go out and address and fill the number one starter need that you had? There would have been tremendous risk to spend more than $200 million on a pitcher already in his 30s. So none of this is free. And if we're going back to the Sale comparison, and I'm not certainly rooting for Kyle Teel or Braden Montgomery to fail, but remember the Red Sox, when they made the trade for Sale, a lot of people thought, wow. Yoan Moncada was close to the number one prospect in the game.
Right.
So this would kind of be the equivalent of putting Roman Anthony in this deal at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the fact that Moncada didn't pan out, still hasn't panned out 6 years later, is a free agent that nobody seems particularly interested in, is a reminder that there's no certainty, even when you're talking about blue chip, highly rated prospects. Kyle Teel may turn into Carlton Fisk for all we know to make the White Sox Red Sox catcher connection. And it's possible that Braden Montgomery is an all-star outfielder, but there's also the possibility that these two guys turn into Moncada and Kopech, the two main pieces in the Sale deal who never really helped out the White Sox. Moncada had 1.5 good seasons. Kopech had Tommy John surgery, moved back and forth between the rotation and the back end of the bullpen, is now kind of turning the corner with the Dodgers, but that's only after they traded him. So, yeah, there's no guarantees or no certainties when you go out and trade for a guy like this. And on the other hand, there's no guarantee that the guys you're giving up are going to make good on their projections. It may be that they're just average major leaguers, or not even that. So it's going to be a while before we can judge this trade. What we do know is that the Red Sox got a guy who can now head their rotation, who they are getting for the prime of his career.
Well, I think that, the other part of that is that you're looking at, of course there's risk in the prospect package, but there's a lot more risk with the Red Sox side of this than there was on the Chris Sale trade, just because of the lack of, you knew what you were going to get out of Chris Sale, and there was a long track record. Crochet does not have that. He has a fifth of the innings that Sale had. So in terms of being an uncomfortable, aggressive, risky move, this one on the Red Sox side of things Not only are you risking that the good prospects you're giving up, like Moncada and Kopech, would be good, but you also are taking a leap and taking a jump on the guy you're acquiring that you did not, 8 years ago on sale. And so that's, I think, a piece that, that's people have kind of forgotten a little bit. I think that, Crochet, if you look at some of the advanced numbers, the FIP, the strikeouts, the stuff, the stat cast is like the red light district. So it is what it is. But that's 1 year. 1 year as a starter, 32 starts. Chris Sale had at the time the Red Sox acquired him. Let's
Four
see,
top five Cy Young finishes.
five of them and 148 starts in the big leagues. That's just the reality of, the ceiling
Yep.
might be there, but the floor is a lot lower. So,
Right.
and that's no knock on Crochet, but that's just what it is.
And I think the better comparison, as our friend John Tomasi at NBC Sports has pointed out, might be the Josh Beckett deal. A guy who had started to show some promise, and obviously Beckett had been something of a postseason phenom for the Marlins, beating the Yankees in the World Series. A young guy who had a huge ceiling, and they gave up two great prospects in Anibal Sanchez and Hanley Ramirez, both of whom went on to have good, though not great, careers for
They had
Miami.
they had really good careers, both of them.
Yeah, I mean, we're arguing over shades here, but
Yeah.
uh, you know, Hanley, I think, won a batting title uh, with the Marlins, but really didn't develop into the absolute five-tool superstar he was supposed to be. Sanchez was a good kind of middle of the rotation starter in baseball for a long time, but the Red Sox got a World Series out of Josh Beckett, and he was their best pitcher in 2007 in the postseason. So, um, look, it's impossible to find exact comps when you're trying to look at other trades. Everything's different. You have to measure things through the prism of the time the deal was made and how things fell out later on. But I think overall, this was a good gamble to make, and I think it's going to work out well for the Red Sox.
So Garrett Crochet is in a Red Sox uniform. The deal's done, official. The expectation is that he'll be introduced and talk about this deal for the first time as a member of the Red Sox on Friday or early next week. And so that is something we'll obviously have covered everywhere. What's next for the Red Sox? That's the big question. I think I was a little bit surprised. Craig Breslow met with the media last night, Sean, or yesterday afternoon, while you were snoozing in the sky. So some of us had to work. And that was at about 3 o'clock after the trade was announced. We went up to the suite one more time for Craig Breslow. He was obviously excited about Crochet. We talked about what's next. By all accounts, they're not done with their pursuit of starting pitching. They are not done trying to upgrade their rotation. This is where I will kind of go out on a limb. And while I understand you can never have too much good starting pitching, well, you can never have too much in the way of, solid arms, solid options, all that type of stuff. I think that now that you have Crochet, you have him for 2 years, the focus should be on extending him, lock that up. To me, would not, quote unquote, get uncomfortable a second time for a starter. I think at this point, both of us probably believe that Corbin Burns is less likely to come here than a couple of other teams. They don't have the urgency, the desperation they had 24 hours ago when we were talking about, losing out on Fried. I think that, if the price is right on somebody like a Jack Flaherty, like a Sean Manaea, like a, dare I say, Nick Pivetta, though I still don't think that's going to happen. Um, could they, do that? The guy you love, I know, is Walker Bueller, who is, still out there and in the mix. Those types of moves, I think, would be, good, but I don't see them, pulling off a blockbuster for another pitcher where they, give up more in terms of position players. Casas for Luis Castillo, I don't love, as everybody I think knows. Um, I think that it's going to be more depth than uncomfortable all in. And look, the other thing here is, and you're banking a lot on Giolito, I guess, in this situation, but to me, you know, The rotation coming into the offseason in terms of your middle and back end options, if you got an ace, was not at all bad. In fact, fine. In fact, probably pretty good. So now that you have Crochet heading it and you have the other four guys, Bayo, Giolito, Crawford, and Hauk, to me, if you enter opening day with that group of five, I actually am fine with it. And I
Yep,
think that it's
I am
actually a
too,
pretty good group.
but I think they're going to keep going
Yeah,
because they understand the value of depth. And
right.
you look at it and say, well, how do they get spots for all six guys? And you have to get a little creative there and how you do it with roles at the beginning of the season. But
And
I
then,
think
of
you got
course, mixing in, I think we talked about Whitlock as a reliever, but also the guys Cooper Criswell, um, Richard
Richard
Fitz,
Fitz,
and
Quinn
Quinn
Priester.
Priester. Like they're
Well,
trying to
that's an
create a
important
good problem for
consideration.
themselves.
It's an important consideration because I don't think they've had those kind of guys waiting in the wings for a while. They've
Right.
had guys like, well, maybe he might be ready in August or September. I mean,
Yeah.
Richard Fitz could be in a rotation. He only made a handful of starts in September, but he certainly could be a number five starter for a lot of rotations, including this one.
Hmm.
Quinn Priester has about a half season or so of big league experience already. They retooled him a little bit at Worcester to make some improvements with his delivery, help with his command, uh, get the velocity up a little bit. So those are options at Worcester where if somebody is hurt, that there are decent fill in and depth options at AAA. But I still think that said, I don't think it's going to be, a front of the rotation guy. I think they're out on Burns now, but I could see, them going for a number three type like a Flaherty or like a Bueller, just to give them six starters, all with proven major league ability going into 2025.
Yeah, and obviously, as we saw, 2 weeks into spring training with Giolito, you pencil all this stuff in throughout December, throughout January, and then it's all for naught sometimes with injuries and stuff like that. You need more than, six, seven, eight starters to get through a major league season. And with no knock, of course, on Cooper Criswell, who was had a pretty good year, and of course is a friend of the program. The school he went to just hired Bill Belichick to be their head coach. You can't if you're going into the season with, Criswell, instead of him being what he was the seventh starter on the depth chart, if he's, ninth and can be a swingman, or, if you have uh somebody else in the sixth through seventh or eighth spots, like that's what teams take. We saw in April, right? Pavetta, Bayo, and Whitlock all got hurt right off the
With
bat.
Giolito already out of the
Right.
equation.
And we saw the year before, when they were starting, or 2 years ago, maybe 2022, they were starting Winkowski and Crawford and Bayo and Connor Siebold for stretches during the season. I mean, these guys do get hurt. In the case of Hauk and Crawford, they were healthy all season. Bayo hit the IL, Pavetta hit the IL, Giolito obviously out for the season, Whitlock out for most of the season. We've seen this over and over and over again. Crochet, a guy with an injury history. Giolito is going to be coming back. Obviously Hauk has an injury history. Bayo has some, had some stuff. So there are questions. And, I think look at how many options a team, and a really good team like the Dodgers
Yeah,
have.
I mean the Dodgers had like 12, 13 starters last year,
Right.
maybe more. I mean, they had a rotation on the IL in the postseason that would have
Right.
won a lot of divisions, and it was they're still scraping it together with bullpen games in October.
Hmm.
And you make a good point about injury history. You're bringing back two guys who had major elbow surgery in Whitlock and Giolito. No guarantee that that goes smoothly and that on March 27th, they're ready to go and give you, either 32 starts or, 75 bullpen innings or more for Whitlock. You just don't know how guys are going to respond, and you have to have options to cover for that.
So again, rotation seems to be still a focus. I think they could get, and now they have Crochet in tow, they could get maybe a little bit more creative when it comes to trades. And to me, maybe including a Fitz or a Priester in some sort of deal would be something that is now a little bit more palatable. Um,
Crawford, I could
you
see
know,
Crawford being
right.
a guy that they'd be willing to move.
Yeah. So those things are now on the table. This just kind of changes the landscape. We've been talking in the same terms of you know, tons of uh tons of position player prospects and no pitch, no, pitching, no pitching. Now, the goalposts have moved a little bit. In terms of the search for, let's get into the catching part of this because I think that's important. Um, Connor Wong's seat was really warm as of yesterday morning. It's cooled off significantly in the last 24 hours. Obviously, Kyle Teel no longer a member of the organization. That's the price they paid. That's the price they were comfortable paying. But it is, for now, a vote of confidence in Connor Wong, who has 4 years left. They made a quick move last night to get Carlos Narvaez from the Yankees, a player who made his major league debut, who hit a little bit in AAA, but is really looked at as a glove first option. My guess is that they're going to continue to look to add to that spot. Narvaez goes on the 40 man. They have Zavala, who will probably be in AAA. But I could see, it's funny now that catching was not a need, like the Higashiokas and the Jansons and the, Austin Hedges of the world. As of a couple weeks ago, we were talking about, those guys don't really fit because Teal's coming and they don't want to sign. Now those guys are all off the board and they fit perfectly. So there's really not much out there. James McCann, Grandal, Elias Diaz. Um, is this as big of a vote of confidence in Connor Wong as it looks from the outside?
I don't know that it was done as a vote of confidence. It's kind of a byproduct of the trade where
Yeah.
now Connor Wong is your guy for the next couple of years, barring some unforeseen trade that comes out of nowhere. I haven't looked at any catchers heading to free agency over the next year or two. Um, we'll see what happens there. But it does make you think about what is their catching future here, because there's nobody in the upper part of the development system who projects as a frontline catcher over the next few years anyway. And, this is now the second top catching prospect that the organization has lost, over the last 5 or 6 years. The tragic passing of Daniel Flores, going back a while, who was thought to be a real top end catching prospect and tragically passed due to cancer. And now the trade of Kyle Teel to the White Sox, you're starting over again in terms of looking down the road. But for the major league roster, they're okay for a while. I think they want to see Wong get better defensively. They want to see him do a better job of framing. They want to see him do a better job of blocking. If they got nothing more from him offensively, I think they'd be okay with, 12, 14 homers a year from him. They want to see him improve behind the plate. And there's progress still to be made there. We'll see how that comes. But clearly, this was done in service to try to go get the frontline starter. And you worry about who your catcher in 2028 is going to be down the road.
Yeah, I mean, Wong, I think the year he had, the start was kind of inflated numbers. He ends up hitting 280 with 13 homers, 52 RBIs, slugs 425, and OPS is 758 for catchers. That's not bad. But a guy that has been inconsistent on both sides of the ball, and we've seen him over the course of 285 big league games now. You kind of know what he's going to be. Is there still projection? Is there still ability as he adds to his age 29 season? Of course. But I think, that this is something that, it's a question mark down the line. I think we all just kind of wrote in Kyle Teel as he'll be the guy for 10 years because of the upside there. And now that could be the case in Chicago. I want to touch on Braden Montgomery a little bit. He's maybe the only player to ever appear in the Fenway Rundown and never appear in a professional game for the Red Sox. So that is a new record. I think that to me, and I asked Breslow about this yesterday, is, they have a body of work on Teel. They know what Kyle Teel is after 2 years. He reached AAA. He checked kind of every box. But the risk here might be on Montgomery. Like the real risk might be that your 12th overall pick, who fell because he broke his ankle, right? He was supposed to be a top 5 pick. You are trading him not because you don't like the player, not because there's no upside, but that's just what the price is. You're trading him, 5 months after drafting him. That one might be the one to watch. I think, Red Sox fans are not as attached to Montgomery as they are to Teel because he's been here a year longer. You've seen him in games. You saw him get up to the White Sox, the big three, all that type of stuff. But I think the Montgomery thing will be really interesting to watch. Obviously, Kyle Teel's probably, if he doesn't make the opening day roster in Chicago, it could happen fast after that. In the case of Braden Montgomery, it's going to be 4 or 5 years. But that one to me, that was a surprising part of this
I
trade
wouldn't
for
say
me.
4 or 5 years for a college player. I mean,
Well, he hasn't played. I
I,
mean,
yeah,
he's at zero. So
right. It's about health for him, but I'd say it's more like 2 to 3 years, not 4 or 5. But
yeah,
you're right. He does have 5 tool capability, which is what attracted the Red Sox to him in the first place. They were willing to put up with the physical uncertainty coming off a major injury, but there's a tremendously high ceiling there, and it could come back to bite him. But again, if Garrett Crochet is giving you 180 to 200 innings and winning double figures in games every year and getting Cy Young votes, you don't care if Braden Montgomery wins the Triple Crown for the White Sox. You've made the trade because you valued having a number one starter, and you got one. But that is, there is the unknown with Montgomery. Once he gets healthy, and what he might be able to accomplish there. But that shouldn't be the Red Sox concern any more than what Yoan Moncada did or didn't do, or what Michael Kopech did or didn't do. It's okay to make a trade that helps both teams down the road. You're prioritizing a frontline starting pitcher, and you got one. So at this point, what Montgomery and Teel, and for that matter, Wickelman, Gonzalez, and Chase Mydroff accomplish is pretty close to irrelevant to the Red Sox.
you have any thoughts on Mydroth?
I see him more as a depth piece, as a guy that could be very valuable, move around to a couple of infield spots. Good bat to ball.
A really good nickname, as Smitty uncovered for us last year, that he, walked so much that they called him Force Field. Not as good as the password, but the Red Sox do have some creativity in the player development pipeline when it comes to these nicknames.
Yes, they do. Mydroth to me doesn't strike me as an everyday player down the road. I think he could be a valuable depth piece and a utility guy that can move around and help out at a number of positions. He does get on base. He does put the bat on the ball. There's been almost no display of power. I think his slug is like 400 at AAA. So usually guys that profile that way don't all of a sudden start hitting rockets when they get to the big leagues. But he could have some value. I know he was a top 10 rated prospect. I don't worry about how that blows back.
I know we touched on this briefly, but the Carlos Narvaez trade, Elmer Rodriguez Cruz goes out, a guy that had a really good year and was, Smith, I think, wrote about him as one of the breakout potential prospects for 2025, lower in the system. International money goes out, only 250,000. And Emmanuel Valdez gets DFA'd. Any big takeaways there?
Valdez had shown spurts as a interesting left-handed bat, but never made consistent contact, couldn't do it consistently, and was frankly a disaster defensively at second base. I think they had seen the writing on the wall here that he wasn't going to be part of the equation. I think I've told you on a few occasions, I see him as kind of a platoon DH type, not much more. So I don't think that's a huge loss.
Well, the housekeeping crew is vacuuming very, very loudly right outside the door in my hotel here in Dallas. So I think that that's a great, great time to wrap as I start yelling. This has been the Fenway Rundown for Thursday. Be sure to subscribe to the Insider Text program.
Nobody's vacuuming here, Chris, but I'll yell anyway. About the Fenway Rundown. Yes, just click on the link to subscribe, and send the link to, wait a minute, what am I doing? I'm completely lost. 617-751-6257. Click the link to subscribe, a 14-day trial period, and then $4.99 after that.